Hello, everyone. This is the Revolutionary Think Tank podcast. If this is your first time here, this is a podcast about political commentary, a sprinkling of philosophy, organizing psychology, and revolutionary thinking. My name is 4AS, and welcome everyone to another zero point 0.5 episode. It's been a little while since we've done one, and today I have Kareem the Dream, our resident AI explorer extraordinaire, joining me here today. How are you going today, mate?
Good man, good man. I'm feeling good. I'm glad to be doing one of these 0.5s again. It's been a while since we had a proper chat, and yeah, no, I miss these ones. There's bit more flexibility in these ones, and they tend to go in some really interesting directions. So
Well,
I'm keen to
yes.
look into this one. We just off camera were having a very interesting conversation, and I'm like, man, we gotta save this for the podcast. Like, this is too good to get into. So
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
Yes, because we do have a juicy topic for today, which is human sustainability. Now, look, I was doing some research, and I'll be completely transparent. I was just fiddling around with Copilot and a few other AI tools that I have, and I just decided to put in a prompt of like, hey, this is the podcast. Give me a top 10 list of what you would suggest we do in the podcast. And it came up with this idea of human sustainability. I'm like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, look, I understand sustainability is usually about the environment, but what the hell
yeah.
do you mean about human sustainability? And at
That's
least I'll give the condensed definition of what it said human sustainability is, and we'll
yeah.
kind of circle back. So
Um,
the condensed definition is human sustainability is the ability of a society to meet human needs, maintain mental and social health, and respect ecological limits without depending on permanent exhaustion, precarity, or burnout to function. Now, it honestly that definition didn't give me pause because I feel like society wise and probably heuristics wise, it's when we think of sustainability, we immediately think, oh, okay, climate change,
yeah,
um, uh,
that sort of
yeah,
stuff. Resource
climate change and
management. Yeah,
environment. Yeah, exactly, and environmental sustainability. And it got me thinking, like, okay, so let's take let's use a phrase that we kind of explained to you before. Let's take a historical materialist lens about
mm,
this. So historical materialism wise, focus on, what are the means of production in order to make the things and stuff that are around us. And then you have the superstructure of that society, which is the culture, the government, the way you run things, that, you know, those in the mode of production where they produce value in society. What is the culture and superstructure that kind of influence in that cycle? So
mm,
let's talk about, well, possibly, let's talk about a previous age compared to, we're currently in capitalism, and before that was feudalism. Like, let's go back to, say, feudalism, where there actually was that traditional view of sustainability. And what I mean by that is,
yeah.
well, everyone knows about the Magna Carta. So in
Refresh
England,
my
it was the
memory.
foundation. Sorry.
Refresh my memory.
Oh no! So the Magna Carta is, in England and as well as in European society, it's like the um, uh, foundational document of kings with, their feudal lords, and like how society is supposed to function. It was supposed to be a charter of how feudal society worked. That's
Okay,
like
so
a broad overview of how things worked, but what not a lot of people know about is connected to the Magna Carta was the Charter of the Forest. So how feudal society worked is, well, you had the lords, and then you had the serfs that worked the land, and then on their days off and so forth, they worked the land so they could subsist, and so on and so forth. Now, because of the Charter of the Forest, they, in England or anywhere else that this charter covered, they had certain rights in order to, say, gather wood, gather the pigs or meat or any of the livestock that was held in common between the serfs or the common folk. But what also goes along with the Charter of the Forest is not only do you have certain rights as a commoner, but it kind of instilled in its people certain responsibilities, because you were a steward to the land. And because you had certain rights, therefore you had certain responsibilities. Now, let's kind of put a pin in that and fast forward to, let's fast forward to the French Revolution. So we're coming to the period of the Enlightenment, and, you get you get people such as Rousseau, you get Locke, people that instill in society this whole idea about, well, reason, rationality, and putting forth a good argument is what will bring forth society. So that kind of leads to the French Revolution, with the whole idea about liberty, equality, fraternity. Now, once again, much like the Charter of the Forest, liberalism and such things like the Declaration of the Rights of Man is, not only do you have a right, but you also have a responsibility. You have a duty. So a lot, it's the classic Ben Parker Spider-Man quote: "With great power comes great responsibility." Like, it's like it's in the zeitgeist, but look, I guess I'm kind of making fun of that quote, but the funny thing is, I think
It's a genuine thing.
again, to kind of press the fast forward button again, post neoliberalism, post the global financial crisis, hey, post even COVID, and how we relate to others. We live in this world that we have these mantras such as greed is good, and
80s
greed is good.
like it's
Sorry?
yeah. That's more 80s.
Yeah.
Like it's still around.
Yeah. I guess.
Don't reduce us to that. Like,
no. Okay. Then let me put it this way. At least
got shit on pretty hard.
Okay. At least the legacy of the greed is good is, I find the legacy of that is the talking points of whenever you do advocate for something like a better future and that sort of thing, you usually get this tidbit of pushback where it's like, oh yeah, but how are you going to deal with human nature? It's human nature to be cruel, or it's human nature to do X. Which
I'll push back against that.
No, but like I kind of agree with you there. And okay, my number one thing is, this is a Noam Chomsky thought experiment, and if anyone were to put me to that, I would prompt them with the ice cream thought experiment. And look, this is a tangent. We've already got on a tangent, but the ice cream thought experiment is, you have a kid who's enjoying his ice cream and walking down the road, and an adult is walking in the other direction, and he just swipes the ice cream and then starts enjoying it and walks in the opposite direction. Now, if you have someone who says, oh, well, it's human nature to be cruel, or it's human nature to just be out for yourself, you ask the person, okay, so you're you're a bystander and you see that happen. Do you think that's acceptable behavior? And quite frankly, if they say yes, it it's kind of an abhorrent thing to say, because the whole point of the thought experiment is to be like, well, no, we are not just automatons that were out there looking for the best decision that's in our favor. Um, you would see a dishonest or an abhorrent act like that, and you would react where it'd be like, and they some people even from that thought experiment say that they would even go out of their way and buy the kid another ice cream to
Yeah.
compensate for
I
that sort
mean,
of misfortune that happened
do
upon them.
you mind if I
So
break it down, like it in
yeah,
a bit
yeah,
more,
okay,
and give you
yeah, yeah,
like
go
more,
for it.
because there are so many different dynamics going on in this thought experiment that are worth
Okay.
unpacking in detail, that might give you a slightly different lens on where you might have landed with it. Because like with like child walking along the street enjoying their ice cream, someone takes it, like if you argue human nature is cruel, or a person is out to sort of look out for themselves, like there is a dynamic in which, say, a human's tendency to focus on themselves will will surpass their desire to look after their fellow human beings. So, like if that adult that was walking along the street, let's say the guy hasn't eaten in 5 days, yeah. So in that
Mm,
situation, there's no food around. Yeah, the only food he sees is the kid's ice cream, and he's thinking, "Shit, if I don't eat that ice cream, I'm gonna die." Yeah. So he
mm,
swiped the ice cream, and he's out, and he's literally like survival of himself. Now, let's say the kid also saved up. I don't know. Took him 10 weeks to save up the money to buy that ice cream. So in that
mm,
situation, like to what extent did the kid have the privilege to eat the ice cream? Did they need the ice cream? Were they, like, how much were they enjoying it? Now, in terms of the bystander that's looking at this is might recognize that as a cruel act, might not have the full context of what the kid was going through, what the adult was
mm,
going through. And over and above that, they're asking the question, should I actually do something about this? So, in terms of should I do something about this, what might be going on for them is, like, firstly, where do I stand on this morally or ethically? Is it human nature? And,
mm.
like, do I have an obligation to actually intervene in this? Should I reprimand the adult? Should I restore justice and buy the kid the ice cream? Do I have enough money in order to buy the kid the ice cream? For how
Mm.
late am I for work in this one? So the amount of different things that are going on, like, depends on ultimately, like the relationships that are going on in that situation. So, a person's relationship with themselves, a person's relationship with their fellow human beings, like the person, like, the direct interaction between two human beings, like one having power over another, one being adult, one being a child. Um, the interaction of the observer effect. Would the adult have taken the ice cream if there wasn't anyone around? Or is the
Mm.
fact that someone else is around make them less likely to take the ice cream? And, like, is it, or I don't know. Let's throw another thought experiment. Like, let's say this is a really shitty experiment, but, like, let's say
Yeah.
there's peer pressure involved. The guy's part of a gang, and the gang is like, we won't accept you into the gang unless you steal this kid's ice cream. Like,
Mm.
if there's pressure from society to actually take, or to commit some type of crime or something like that, then you've got a
Yeah.
completely different dynamic. So there are so many different ways that this thought experiment could go, that depend on relationship patterns between yourself and between other people. But we'll talk more about the relationships later. But how
Yeah,
does that
yeah.
how
Let's
does
kind
that
of
speak
put
to
that
you?
in a Yeah. Let's kind of put a pin in it just for now. But like, I guess the reason why I brought that up is that at least that human nature talking point that I was mentioning before,
Yeah,
there's a sense that at least in the post GFC world, I feel like we've lost sight of how hand in hand from feudalism to in certain contexts to liberalism, whereas the foundation of the Enlightenment and reason to um, to the turn of the century, we've lost the
the
that you have to
responsibility.
have rights hand in hand with responsibility slash duties.
Yeah,
And I to go all the way back to what the original point I was making is that, well, sustainability, at least in the narrow context that we think about it in terms of environmental sustainability, yes, that is fundamentally about rights as well as responsibilities. And I think it's not so far fetched, or it's not much of a stress to think about how a superstructure within society and how we deal with things that bring value to our society, and go, well, actually, we can think about human sustainability because we've lost our ability to be custodians in our society, and where we don't have that base. Um, I guess that working that muscle of, okay, well, I want this right. What sort of skills and what sort of responsibilities do I need to take on in order to make that a reality, or to kind of convince people to build a relationship with me to do the thing.
yeah.
If you get where I'm going with that.
Yeah. Can I just pause on that one for a second? Because like to me, I look at I look at society as being a social contract. So for me, like
Mm,
the the thought experiment that I like to put out there is I say, look, anyone theoretically, like if you wanted to, you could go out and live off the grid. Like if you wanted to go and say, I want to live off the land, you could go out to the middle of nowhere. You could hunt for yourself, build your own shelter. Like if you decided to reject society as a whole, like I this might not be practically possible for everyone because of land rights and stuff, um, but basically, if you wanted to go off the grid and sort of reject society as a whole because you're damning society as a whole, then that option is available to you. So, but the
mm,
problem is, you know, if you go out and reject society, then you don't have access to electricity. You don't have access to people that'll get food for you. You don't have access to medicine. You don't have access to a whole bunch of stuff. So what happens is, in order for you to have access to those things, the social contract is you need to be at least functional within the society. And society has
mm,
certain rules. And those rules are designed in order to keep society predictable. So if you break those rules, then we say we don't want you as part of society. And, in some cases, we put you in jail, like,
mm,
for breaking those rules. So the social contract is you're welcome to be a part of society, but along with that comes the responsibility to, at the very minimum, not break the rules. But
mm,
but it still comes along with again, and I champion what you were talking about, quality, freedom, liberty. Um, it's the idea of the rights that you have still come along with social obligations, and I think cross culturally, um, there are variations in terms of people's sense of responsibility to society. So I think I might be speaking out of place, but I haven't been to Japan. You have been to Japan. I'm a huge fan of Japan, Japanese culture. My understanding of Japan is their sense of social responsibility is a lot higher than it might be in Western nations. So, um, arguably, China might be the same. So, there are some cultures that are renowned for, like collectivist cultures, that are renowned for that sense of social responsibility. Versus Western individualist cultures where we do tend to prioritize the self, over other people. So, which does have impacts in terms of sustainability, because look, I mean, you could look at sustainability from an individual perspective, or you could look at it from from the community or societal or the relationships perspective. So going back to the thought experiment,
Mm.
like if that adult that hasn't eaten in 5 days and swipes the child's ice cream is thinking about sustainability for themselves, then they're going to swipe that ice cream. That's quite predictable behavior. But if they're thinking about the sustainability of the community, then they might be inclined to behave differently. But anyway, I've rambled for enough.
No, but I think that's incredibly relevant though, because at least before I went into the document and when it was talking about human sustainability, look, this could just be my 2026 thinking, but at least I found at the start of this year that I'm thinking more about how at least logic and developing premises and conclusions
Mm,
and to entertain ideas. It's the best way to do that is it's not only a good idea to have the right answer, but it's also really important to ask the right question. And
absolutely, could
bef-
not agree with you
and
more.
before and before we even discuss about human sustainability, I felt like what such a concept should be focusing on is, well, the three fundamental questions is, can you subsist in society? Are you outsourcing your thinking? And are your actions sacrificing long-term goals for short-term goals?
Hang on,
So
when
I,
you say outsource your thinking, like,
yeah.
how did that arise naturally as a question from what you were looking at?
Oh, for me, I was more thinking along the lines of, are you familiar with? Look, I know he's not everyone's famous favorite theorist at the moment, Noam Chomsky, but he's one of his most famous books is Manufacturing Consent. Do you know much about that book?
No, no, no.
Okay, so long story short, with the book is that the media and the fourth estate and um, its fundamental function within society is supposed to be to inform the public.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
it's he in the book kind of deconstructs that with what he calls five filters, and what he says is that in order for people to consume media within society, and also the people who own the businesses and who are effectively big players within capitalism, there's like a machine to kind of at least silence dissenters and to promote a certain narrative within society that
Probably. Yeah,
will fundamentally people's beliefs or what they view in society is a manufactured narrative.
yeah.
Like for example, like just to kind of hone in on one idea is one of my favorite ones of manufacturing consent is the magnifying glass effect. So that concept
Yeah,
is so the media focuses on issue X. It's plastered all over the news about issue X. But because X has been given a spotlight, you
Why
don't
doesn't get
hear
the
about
spotlight?
why, and why could
Yeah,
be really important for the public,
yeah,
for the public consciousness.
sure.
So, for example, let's take, like, this is a hyperbolic example, but um, let's say a massive scandal happened in the government, and that's issue X. But then issue Y could be, well, and let's say issue X is a federal government, but issue Y, it could be, the solar panel or the renewable energy industry has just broken the ceiling of their supply for renewable energy, and it's like overtaking coal in terms of the energy produced in Australia. Let's
Okay,
just say,
yeah,
but because everyone's so focused on
the
um,
scandal. Mhm.
the scandal, and it's, front page news,
Yeah,
people are, because of the magnifying glass, people aren't really focusing on
yeah.
page 14, which is about solar panels, produced,
This,
being so productive in society.
this
So
happens with a lot
that
of
is a
science in
form of
general.
manufacturing consent.
Yeah, this
Sorry.
happens with a lot of science in general. Like scientific advancements don't get as much like media airtime as they should. Like
Yeah.
it's
However, I will admit, though, Gnome kind of treats that concept a little bit more perniciously compared to the way I've described it. But that was a more, let's say, a more generous form of the
yeah,
magnifying
yeah.
glass effect.
There's way more damning examples of it, but it absolutely is an
Mm,
effect, and it absolutely is something that like well, I think this is sort of how like media sort of evolved over time
mm,
into like these media players, and particularly in the days of newspapers and printed materials. That sort of stuff was quite easy to influence. So it was attractive
yes.
in terms of the power dynamics between media and the public and the government's relationships with media and influencing the narrative. But I think since the internet age has come around, and since the general availability of information has proliferated, and you could argue in some ways whether or not social media has been a good thing or a bad thing, because people can share stuff on social media, bring attention
Mm,
to deserving things, or whether or not the social media players themselves are influencing reality in a new way, and promoting viral algorithms, and so it's not about sensationalism anymore. It's more about maximizing engagement with the devices. So it's
Thank you. But yeah, because thank you for bringing up at least the second part of the reason why I focus on that question, because I feel like, yes, you are correct. I can't remember whether it was 1970 or like it was the 1970s or the 1980s when GNOME came out with manufacturing consent. But
yeah,
at, at the very least, I feel like the second part of the reason why I was asking myself that question is because well, we now live in the attention economy.
yeah,
I think it's very understandable that people, when viewing their news, it. I feel like it's a reasonable, like, heuristic that people have, that they see a headline and they don't actually look through the article themselves.
I do it all the
And
time. I'm not gonna lie.
yeah, but like, but the sensationalist part is the headline, and people
Yeah,
don't actually go into, like, fact check. Oh, is the article actually saying what the title is?
I'm
Because the
yeah,
media know that because we are so time poor, it's less likely we're actually going to go through the logical process of sorting that stuff out. And I think really that's what's supposed to be the role of media in the original framing of how it
Yeah.
is. Like I
I'll,
think
I'll,
I like to link it back to a good analogy I once heard of, at least the Hippocratic oath that the media is supposed to do, is
yeah,
that it's not supposed to both
tell the
sides
truth.
things.
Yeah.
So, say you had a scenario where somebody was claiming that it was raining outside and another person saying that it was bone dry. Like the media and the whole point of the reporter is not to interview the person who's saying it's not raining and the person who says it is raining. It's to bloody go outside and see whether it's raining, to actually fact check the scenario.
Yeah,
But
but
I think
it's
in the
more complicated than that, but like it's
no,
because
but you understand the point. You understand the
I get
point I'm
the
trying to
point.
make.
Yeah, they've got a responsibility to tell the truth, the objective truth, and that's what they should be doing. It means not trying to manufacture a narrative or sensationalize or attract viewers or build an audience or any of that stuff. They've got a responsibility to tell the truth. The problem comes when the truth is not so clear, and there are conflicting interpretations of genuinely ambiguous phenomena. Like so, but I get where you're going with it. Like it's go out and fact check, see if it's raining. You know that totally makes sense. So, but yeah,
But yeah, I think what it was supposed to encompass is the idea. And look, I will admit that question is probably a lot more provocative than I originally thought it was. Like it does seem if you didn't understand the reason behind me wanting to ask the question, you might think that's pejorative. You might turn
yeah,
around and be like, "Oh, does 4AS think we're dumb?" Like, no. I what I'm trying to say is, well, is that actually a genuine thought you had where you went through all the facts and you're like, yes, this is genuinely my opinion, or is it you saw the headline of something
like someone
um,
else is thinking.
and the headline could have leaned a certain way, and
Yeah,
you've been like, the headline said issue X is bad. I think it's bad as well, and because you've been so busy, you don't actually stop to check said thing. Like, I
yeah,
think that's
yeah.
a
No,
decent question.
no, I absolutely get where you're going with it, and I'll stay in this for just a touch further before I come back to questions one and three, which I've forgotten what they are. So I'll get you to repeat them. But
Mm.
in like, I'll take it a step further by saying in today's day and age, um, even the headlines themselves, like, is at times too much work for me. There's so much information that I want to consume that I'm trusting AI to work through the headlines and the articles and to give me the summary. And in some ways, I'm outsourcing my thinking to the AI by giving me the summary rather than going back
Right.
to the actual news source. And this happens and I've noticed myself doing this a fair bit actually. Is like I tend to run searches for like peer-reviewed scientific literature as primary sources because that's the stuff that you're supposed to be able to trust the most. But the problem is when I actually I'll read the AI summary and I'll get a feel for it and get a basic understanding of what's going on. But every time I actually stop and pause and go back and read the primary literature, a scientific study, I learn something in the nuance of the way it's presented that I wouldn't have otherwise learned from the AI summary. So there's this tension between going back and fact checking the sources and how much time I have to do that and how important it is to whatever issue that I'm working on versus, like the is a basic understanding of it good enough for me. So but
Mm.
anyway, questions one and three, but
Yeah,
what were
but
they?
like, but just to kind of end that point that you were making is the convenience of you getting that AI summary, does that harm your understanding of the issue so much that it's not as rich if you had the time, you had your full attention in order for you to go through and fact check everything. Like, look, it's just a fact. A lot of people are time poor, and uh, like you, uh, it's also a product of our society. Is that there are elements of things where there's an opportunity cost. If I'm doing X, I'm therefore not doing Y, and
Yeah, absolutely.
there's like a cost to things. When should we really be running that a society like that? Like, I don't. I can see how that could be value to a boss, but I don't see how that could be value to people's mental health or people's sense of self or whatnot. And that actually might lead into what you were asking about question 1 and 2. Question 1 is, can you subsist in society, and uh, are your actions sacrificing long-term goals for short? Sorry, are your actions sacrificing long-term
I
for
just know
short-term
on the
goals?
slide. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So, look, fundamentally, what those three questions translated to is at least what human sustainability was talking about, or if I'm being completely transparent, AI speculated as to what human
Yeah,
sustainability is about um, mental sustainability, social
but
sustainability, and then environmental sustainability.
yeah,
So
there
just
was
to kind of
one.
give, yeah,
Sorry.
go for it.
No, there was no, because I took a look at the summary that you sent through, and there was one thing that that stood out for me, which was when we think about social sustainability, it talked about like loneliness as being a failure of the system, not necessarily of the individual, and that quote struck me like quite it resonated quite deeply with me because when we think about like social sustainability, like it does
Mm,
matter in terms of like what our patterns of relationships are, between our immediate family, between our friends, between our communities, but and more broadly, what are those patterns of relationships with with our nation. So, where we feel isolated from those systems, it's entirely possible that people have, in some respects, prioritized their own needs over the needs of others, which,
mm,
look, again, being in the situation we live in, like you were saying this before, like we are time poor these days. We do live in an attention economy. So, in terms of who's competing for our attention, um, the person who's lonely and might not necessarily feel comfortable expressing their loneliness um, might not get as much attention from their fellow human beings as they actually need in order for them to be able to survive or to subsist within the society. So, and I think in
mm.
some respects, the people that will prioritize, their work I'll say this tongue in cheek, but, allow their attention to be manipulated by, the people that are paying big dollars to get your attention.
Mm.
If we're not aware of those dynamics, then we're allowing that stuff to happen. So, if that's happening and we are sort of prioritizing, our own needs, then it is a failure of the system to acknowledge, um, acknowledge the plight of the lonely person. And I think that might be part of the contribution that we have towards this this loneliness epidemic is that, this individualist, you know society, that's proliferated in Western nations, where, my time is valuable, therefore I must be paid for it, or it should only go where I want it to go. Um,
Mm.
might lead us in situations where, we're not as actively involved in the fellow plight of our human beings, or yeah, it's a sad situation to think about, but short term goals
Yeah.
versus long term goals. I think, yeah, look, if you're prioritizing survival, or if you're prioritizing, and for a lot of people, work is survival. So, you've got to pay the
Mm.
rent, you've got to pay the bills, you've got obligations to, at the very minimum, your family. How much time do you have to devote to looking after the environment as you know an example of a longer term goal, or anyway, yeah, you were saying,
Look, all I was going to say is fundamentally what the first question was is, well, we are living in a cost of living crisis. Um, now we're living in this might date this episode, but we're living in a fuel crisis at the moment.
yeah,
Um, and because I'm not sure if, most people were anticipating uh, somebody to press the war button overseas, and now the Strait of Hormuz is closed to a lot of Western nations. And one action
yeah.
can cause so much pain throughout the entirety of the world. But
Can I can I give
it's
you
it's
a quick tangent on this? Like, because you laugh at this one. This one's absolutely hilarious.
okay.
This is what I think has happened. Yeah. Um, uh, well, I'm a smoker. Cigarettes in Australia are incredibly expensive. The government tax the shit out of them. They just decided that I want smokers. Basically, if you're going to smoke, you've got to pay out the asshole for it. So if you've got a massive black market of illegal cigarette trade, um, that that the government's been cracking down on recently, and like vapes are a big thing as well, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, I went to go buy a packet of cigarettes from my local tobacconist. That's dramatically more expensive than the legal packet of cigarettes that I'm supposed to buy. And I couldn't get. I was told that these guys were running out of stock. Now these guys never run out of stock. Yeah, so
Right.
like so so the guy's telling me he's only got 6 packets left, and I'm like, and I
Okay.
wanted to buy a carton, and I put it together that, hang on, if we're in a fuel crisis and there's a whole bunch of like oil, like shipping containers that can't move because they don't have enough oil to be able to, like, they can't secure enough fuel to actually guarantee their routes, then that has impacts on like the black market trade of illegal cigarettes, which winds up impacting me in terms of whether or not I can get like the far ranging implications of the fuel crisis that we don't even think about, that that can wind up affecting our daily lives is like, for this is going to sound stupid, but for me, cigarette, like, I'm addicted to smoking. Like, it is subsistence for me.
Yeah, but like that's the thing. Like in this post neoliberal world, this post global world, yeah. If you make the like if you mess with one really important card in this house of cards,
Yeah,
it has long reaching effects.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
especially if you like, and really, again, this seems to be the episode of tangents, but
yeah,
yeah, if you mess with the Strait of Hormuz, where it's the exit point for a lot of oil to come out of uh, the Middle East region, then yeah, that's gonna make the rest a majority of the world suffer, especially us being at the arse end of the
Yeah,
pipeline, or the supply chain, I should say. Where we're gonna definitely feel it.
yeah, yeah.
But
No, no, totally. It's
but
yeah,
but yes, I digress. The whole point of those three questions was to prompt, and I'll make sure for anyone that wants to read the summary to put it in the show notes. But it was supposed to prompt what it called mental sustainability. So what that means is predictability, time, and agency. Social sustainability, so repair that leads to repairable relationships and collective capacity, and then ecological sustainability, which I think a majority of people would have a grasp on.
correct.
So the question translated into those three things about human sustainability.
Yeah, can I pause on this one, because this is like the point that I really want to like ram home on this one is like all of these different variables can be modeled in terms of their relationships with each other. So, when we think about our own mental energy, where our time is going, where our attention is going, these things can be modeled in terms of relationships with ourselves,
Mm,
relationships with other people, with our families, with our communities, and relationships with the environment. So, in
mm,
terms of how can we actually change this, to me, I think the key is to start seeing ourselves as objects or as individuals, and to start understanding what the patterns of relationships are around us that we live in, that we're a part
mm,
of. So starting to see these systems as dynamic, like things like greed is good, come out of this individualist mentality where you see yourself as an individual, and needing to sort of prioritize your own goals. Now,
mm,
what actually, from an evolutionary perspective, there are situations in which survival of the fittest, is going to be a dynamic, and again, that you could model that in terms of relationships, in terms of that dynamic being adversarial relationships between humans, which might be
mm.
detrimental to some people. So, like power dynamics or relationships as well. But there are also dynamics in which, um, the survival of the species, depends on our collective unity. So,
Mm,
like this is where how societies evolve. Like this is
mm,
where like tribes, when like we're actually hardwired to get a dopamine hit from charitable contributions. Not a lot of people know
yeah.
that. Like it's we actually, from an evolutionary perspective, we get rewarded for looking after our fellow human beings. It makes us feel
Yes.
good. Now, why did evolution reward that? Because the people who looked after their human beings survived, and the people who didn't
Mm,
were selected out for it. They didn't survive.
yes.
So
Mm,
tribes as a whole were better off when people looked after each other. So the conditions under which, it makes sense for us to look after our fellow human beings, they do exist. They absolutely do
mm,
exist. But it's also possible to create conditions where the relationships between the variables, the human beings
yeah.
involved, are adversarial, and the survival of the fittest context rocks up as well. So, it's once we start to understand things from a systems perspective, from a relationships perspective, like, and going back to the cigarettes example, like the
Mm,
relationship between the war and the Strait of Hormuz, the relationship between the Strait of Hormuz and oil, the relationship between oil and shipping containers, the relationship between shipping containers and the containers that I get my cigarettes from, the relationship between the black market trade in Australia. And like you can model all the way down what these relationships look like and how these things impact on us, what our role is in them, and what our responsibilities are within them as well. And that's the type of thinking that we need. We've got to stop seeing ourselves as individuals and start seeing ourselves as part of the bigger system, because that's the only way under which we're actually going to appreciate the responsibilities that we
Mm.
have. And that's the only way that society can evolve, like collectively, that we actually advance humanity as a species. We evolve as a species. If we're all looking out for our own needs, we don't evolve. Like this is as far as we make it. Like everything grinds to a halt. Scientific advancement grinds to a halt. Like it's yeah.
But
Anyway,
to be completely honest, like at least in the neoliberal era, like there was a degree of hubris because you had books like Francis Fukuyama come out, that proudly proclaimed that it was the end of history, and there was nothing further that humanity had to learn, and this was the best we were ever going to do for ourselves. So we can just sit back and relax and rest on our laurels. Like, look, I'm
it's just a
probably
lack of imagination,
I'm
really.
probably doing a bit of a pejorative take on it, but
I,
the thing is, it promoted people to not really think further when
yeah,
there's always a chance to kind of learn things. And I think it circles back to what I was originally saying, is that with any call to a right or any call to an action, there's also a responsibility, and at least these calls to action with in the article with like mental sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. I think the thing it is, and look, these might be Marxian terms, but the thing that I found it kept on coming back to was the idea of alienation. So
yeah,
I know
yeah,
typically, Marxian wise, uh, what Marx would refer to in alienation is within a workplace or within somebody's labor. So hey, you have the person who owns the place, and you as the worker, you get a wage and they get the value from your work. They you do a huge project for them. It's very stressful for you. You've spent all of this time and effort on doing this thing for your boss. He gets the value of that. And what do you what look, I'm modernizing this in the 21st century, but what do you get in return? Sure, you get money in order to survive, to exist in this cost of living crisis and this fuel crisis. But what you got out of that was the side effects of feeling burnt out a quarter through the year, stress for something that really, if you didn't have to do it, you wouldn't have put yourself through that stress even to begin with,
yeah,
and you gain a lot of anguish and mental stress because you're doing this thing that just happens to come along with the social contract, because if you don't work, you die. And then there's
yeah,
another
yeah.
aspect
No, I
to
get
this,
it.
which I kind of felt went into the social sustainability, is um, rather than Marx, this is more of a Vladimir Lenin take. I'm pretty sure he discusses this in What Is to Be Done, but political alienation. So in that one, because somebody is in charge, because people are making societal change on your behalf, that sense of helplessness, that alienation from those political decisions, you almost become numb to it. You are like, oh yeah, this situation sucks, but
There's nothing I can
what
do
can I
about
do?
it. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
what what can I do?
So,
And
yeah.
that that alienation, that look, that can work in the short term, but it's definitely not going to work in the long term.
Yeah. So let me can I weave the common thread through this one, because like
Yeah.
the common thread through alienation is unequal power dynamics. So
Mm.
basically the relationship between the worker and the boss is an unequal power dynamic. The relationship between the leader and the community or society that they're leading is an unequal power dynamic, and to some extent there is an unavoidable part of relationships with unequal power dynamics. So, like a doctor and a patient is an unequal power dynamic. So there's not much you can do about that situation. So we have to expect that on some level. I'd argue that going back to what I was saying about the social contract.
Can I put a caveat to that though, Kareem? This is just a personal belief, and this could be, this is a bit of an anarchist take on things, but various anarchist theorists have talked about justified hierarchy. So, sure, in justified hierarchy, what you were saying before, if I go and visit an ophthalmologist, an eye doctor, and I'm the patient, and he's saying there's something wrong with my eye, and he's done surgery on it, and for the next, I don't know, 6 months, I have to use eye drops in order to help. I don't know, say clean out what's in my eye, or at least to keep the fluids up in my eye. Uh, yeah, sure. That can be classified as a justified hierarchy because he is a master within that field. He is a person that is a specialist, a technocrat in that field that understands the eye compared to what I would know. So,
Yeah.
in that, there is an inbuilt justified hierarchy.
Yeah.
However, um, the maybe the boss that's the head of a construction company that inherited it from his dad, and his dad inherited it from his dad, and he, I don't know, he just kind of flounders about and doesn't really care about the business, and really
Yeah.
it's the managers and the exec that are really holding up the business rather than the guy who owns it.
Yeah.
um, um,
Unjustified.
is that as much as a justified hierarchy
So
compared to the
it's
ophthalmologist?
look, the reality is it's probably not a binary. There's probably a gradient between the two, and one of
Mm,
the confounding variables is this relates to the concept of meritocracy, which we've discussed on other podcast episodes, like whether or not a meritocracy can is actually we were talking about classroom of the elite. I remember in a previous
yeah,
discussion where yeah, we were debating, like how meritocracies can go wrong, and this one completely changed, my thinking on in terms of hang on, like what are the power dynamics within meritocracies as well, like, but
yeah.
but
I will say to the viewers, if you're into animes and you haven't checked
yeah.
out Classroom of the Elite, you really
I'm not a
should.
big
It's
anime.
it.
Absolutely, cannot recommend it highly enough. Like it's like this one got me thinking about manipulation on another level entirely. So, but but like I think it's we thinking about it from the societal perspective again. Um, you know, like when you think about putting someone in charge of an entire group of people, um, and this is the org psych in me coming out, is the frameworks that we have for assessing whether or not that person is capable of making decisions on behalf of this group of people or generating policies like are not particularly good. Like
Mm,
at the moment, like we rely on what's basically a popularity contest that
mm,
doesn't really assess what a person's capabilities are in terms of the role that they're being asked to fill. So
mm.
it's if we wind up in situations where we have leaders that aren't necessarily making the best decisions or that are in our interest, um, that's kind of a function of the dynamics that we've accepted in terms of and this isn't an indictment on democracy as a whole. Like you've got a right to elect your leaders and have a say in who governs the country, but the problem is in terms of how you go about evaluating who is the best person to run your country. Are you gravitating towards the person you like, the person who doesn't look like a dumbass, who presents themselves well, who speaks confidently, or are you actually looking at the specific capabilities that are required in order to be a leader, which might be, say, I don't know, um, you know, uh, like general leadership capabilities, like conflict resolution, like I don't know, maybe ability to empathize with the public. Like there's a whole matrix of capabilities that are required in certain positions that
Mm.
we can actually evaluate for. Like org psychs are tasked with building selection and assessment criteria to evaluate these capabilities so that we can make sure that the right person winds up with the right job. Now, I'm probably coming across as elitist with this, but like the average person who's being asked to vote on who should be leader doesn't have access to these evaluation criteria, isn't necessarily familiar with the capabilities that are required to do the role, and it's probably not even thinking about it on that level, if I'm being perfectly honest. Like, and I don't blame them. Like, who has the time to go out and learn all this stuff? But you still deserve the right to elect, to have a say in who governs you. Now, we as
Yeah.
humans tend to gravitate towards people who project confidence. Now, the problem with projecting confidence is when you're a statistician, we like no statistician is ever more than 95% confident in anything because that's
Mm.
the standard that we use for statistics. Like there's we don't like people who hedge what they say, who give disclaimers all the time, who don't project confidence, even if their understanding of the situation is far more realistic than the guy that comes in and says, I know exactly what to do. I know exactly how we're going to fix this. Um,
I,
it's it.
I'm so I I'm so angry with society that we don't give more qualifiers and disclaimers about what we say because
Yeah, me too.
some
Like
stuff
it's
is
false
so based on
certainty.
context.
Yeah,
It's so
what
based on
it
context.
is it's a premature convergence on conclusions. And if you actually understood how many different cognitive biases we fall prey to, how many different mental shortcuts we take in order to arrive at a conclusion, because we don't like dealing with uncertainty, and like uncertainty is anxiety provoking for some people. So like
Mm.
anxiety functions for a reason. It's how we deal with uncertainty as a whole is not good. Now, what's even worse is the people that are good at handling uncertainty. We don't like them. We like the people who project confidence, like the people that aren't good at
Mm.
handling uncertainty, the people who take these mental shortcuts, who fall prey to them all the time. Like that's what I'm angry at society for. We've gone on a mad ramble about this and we've really lost the track from sustainability. But again, I think just bringing it back to the relationships context, I think once once we stop, once we understand the dynamics involved in these systems, yeah, understanding the patterns of relationships between leader and community they're leading, between the majority and the minority. The patterns between people that have been alienated from their jobs and their bosses, and the people who are engaged in meaningful work where there's a more equal power dynamic. There's still a power dynamic there, but it just happens that the power distance happens to be a little bit reduced. So it's the power dynamics are unavoidable. There are always going to be unequal power dynamics. We are always going to have leaders that are tasked with making decisions, for the majority of the population. And we're always going to have a situation in which, not the best people for the job might not always get the job. So if they're making decisions that wind up prioritizing short-term goals over long-term goals, then it's kind of predictable when you think about it on that level. So we've got to be able to step back and take a look at the bigger picture and see the system as a whole if we want to start being able to prioritize those long-term goals. So,
well, look, you're kind of bringing up another aspect of Marxian thinking, which is viewing the system, or at least your analysis of the system, in totality. Because especially when you are basing things on short-term thinking, like let's just look at the cost of living crisis. The farm, well, actually, well, even more relevant. Let's talk about the fuel crisis. So the Iran situation happens. They close the Strait of Hormuz to a majority of Western countries. The petrol stations immediately raise up their prices. That affects, that hits the pocket of the consumer, but then that also hits the pocket of the farmers. Suddenly, food prices go up, and it makes things a lot more dearer. And because everything is part of a totality, everything is affected on a global scale, then everything just flows up. And because everyone's like, well, I'm raising my prices because the farmers are raising their prices. The farmers raise their prices because the petrol stations have raised their prices. Like, everything is interconnected, and everything has a relationship with themselves. But even in the minute stuff, like the more small scale stuff, especially in much more individualist countries, like, do people how well do people know their neighbors? How well, I think people at least have a reasonable relationship with their families. But look, I'm not going to speak for everyone. I'm sure there's always exceptions to the rules, but I doubt a lot of people would say they have a really intimate relationship with their neighbors compared to, say, previous generations. And again, that links back to what I was referring to before about when you have rights, you also have to take on responsibilities and the duties that entails. And again, I kind of want to link it back to another leftist term, which really I think is very apropos in this discussion, is the old adage of agitate, educate, and organize. Now, look, organizing, joining an organization that agitates for change, or joining a union or anything like that, that is the action part of things. But I think what tends to get less focus on, or at least gets memed, or is like, read your theory, bro, is is actually a much more important lesson. Um, and it's a lesson that usually gets thrown into the more self-helpy channels, and also like a certain sector of the economy or the industry. But it's really an important lesson to for people to learn, I think, is, well, if you truly want to help yourself, if you truly want to help society, you need to know what has happened in the past. You need to know what has happened in history. You also need to better yourself, because if you better know society, or at least have critical thinking skills of, look, I live by this quote, and I will
Yeah,
die
yeah.
by this
I
quote.
can't even tell you
And
what
the
the quote
sign of an
is.
educated mind is the ability to entertain an
It's
idea without
David
fully
Nation.
accepting it.
Yes, yeah.
And I think,
It's my favorite quote.
personally,
Like, yeah.
uh, but personally, um, if we were to recapture and lead to a world that does have an adequate right for us to subsist, I do believe that that means that in society we need to reclaim the responsibility and the duties that are tied with that. But in doing so, we need to improve ourselves and actively work towards improving the relationships with other people within society.
Mm.
And I think that's also where it stems from. And look, I get it. Like I think with the internet, it's quite easy for you to be an asshole and a dickhead, because it's like the phenomenon with vehicles. Like, look, you're a psych student, you would understand this. It's
Yeah.
the whole point of road rage, right? You see the person as the vehicle rather than an
The
actual person.
person, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very easy for you to be for you to be uh, legend in his own mind 2024, and say, like, oh, fuck you, X, Y, and Z, you're the worst person in the world, because there's no accountability.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
just said something awful, and there's absolutely no accountability for you saying that. But we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard if we want to go from short-term thinking to long-term thinking.
No, no, I agree 100%. And yeah, it's it's I mean, going back to what I was saying before, it's like, but what you were saying around having that relationship with yourself, and wanting to improve yourself and holding yourself to a higher standard. Um, Look, I think that there's like context always matters. And context is part of this systems thinking that I'm talking about. Is that for someone who's in survival mode, who's in the cost of living crisis, who's got stress from their families and a whole bunch of stuff, they're probably not thinking about this is the best time in my life to be improving myself. Like they've probably got other stuff on their mind. So their capacity for growth, their capacity for improvement under these circumstances might not be ideal. So the amount of pressure that we put on them to grow in those moments and reach out to their neighbors, and to be friendly, and to start fulfilling, their responsibilities might not be optimal at that point in time. And when we talk about, like, only because I was talking to ChatGPT about this relationships thing before, and it gave me this beautiful example of contextual relationships. Like it
Mm,
said, when you think about um, the relationship between rain and crops, um, no rain is bad for crops. Little bit of
mm,
rain is what they need. and the relationship between rain and crops grows up to a point, but it reaches a ceiling beyond which rain is bad for crops. You get floods.
Mm,
So,
mm,
like it's context matters, and there are situations where there are optimal conditions that lie between certain boundaries for the right type of behavior to occur. So,
yeah.
in terms of what's happening in with anonymity online and and lack of accountability and stuff. If you're um, if you've got a reputation online to protect, then in that situation, you kind of have to be careful about what you say, unless you've got a reputation for being a dick online. But if you're a nobody online, who's not particularly concerned with how other people view them, then you can say whatever you want without consequences. But the
Mm.
context and your place within the system, is ultimately going to affect your behavior. But I'd still encourage the system thinking perspective on it. Sorry for harping on it about so much. It's been an obsession of mine recently. So
No, and but like, look, it's probably a good point to kind of bring this in, but before we kind of started, well, this is the pre-show talk, if you will. You were
yeah,
talking a lot about statistics and how this could relate to
yeah,
human sustainability. I'm actually
yeah.
genuinely curious how you would bring statistics into analyzing human sustainability. Like,
Okay.
can you talk about that for a sec?
Yeah, okay, all right, sure. Let me, okay. So, all right, governments make decisions based on pretty much everyone. Governments, organizations, um, anybody that has access to data these days, and everybody has access to data these days, has makes decisions based on the data. Data, theoretically, once you have enough data and you notice the patterns in the data, you can make predictions about what will happen if you manipulate certain variables within the data. If I make this policy change, how much impact will it have? If I implement this health intervention or this public messaging, this public health messaging system, how many people will it reach? If we invest in this vaccine, how does it reduce the health economics on the burden of cost? So the ability to be able to analyze data and to be able to use that data to make better decisions is part of what we call evidence based practice in medicine, in psychology, in a whole bunch of fields where we want to be relying on evidence to be able to make um, uh, better predictions. And those, so better predictions is all about navigating uncertainty,
Mm,
and so the better predictions we can make, the less uncertainty we have to navigate. And if we're navigating less uncertainty, then we can make better decisions about who gets impacted as part of what systems. So statistics
right.
has a huge role to play in terms of what decisions actually get made, because that's the way the world is headed. Everything is data based these days. Um, if you'll allow me to go on a tangent with this, and
Yeah.
just kind of show you what I'm talking about. A system I've been working on recently. I'm hesitant to
Yeah.
disclose too much detail about it, but it's just been found to I've just managed to run some experimental results on some data sets and get some really fascinating results with it. All this is statistic based stuff, but basically it's um, predictions. There's a basic statistical method called regression. Are you familiar with linear regression? Have you heard that term at all?
You might have to explain it to me
Okay,
again.
no worries. So, okay, imagine like you've got you imagine you're looking at a graph. You've got
Mhm.
let's say you've got height height on one axis, like the
Okay.
x-axis,
Yeah.
so the bottom,
Hmm.
and you've got weight on the other. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
I'm just pulling these figures out of thin air, but you could plot someone's height versus their weight as a coordinate on that graph. Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you've got their height and their weight, you've got an x coordinate and you've got a y coordinate. So you put a dot
Yeah.
there. Yep. So what
Mm.
happens is if I sample a whole bunch of people, they're going to have a whole bunch of different heights and weights, but each person will have a height and a weight. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I'm looking at this graph, I'm going to see a whole bunch of dots on this graph now. Yeah. Now,
Mm.
when I'm looking at the graph, if I want to understand the relationship between height and weight, then I'll do what's called a regression, which means I'm trying to find a line of best fit that the dots represent. So we might find that
Right.
over time, people that are taller weigh more, for example.
Mm.
Like
Mm. Mm.
that might be a plausible conclusion to reach. So so you would see a line that, like, imagine a line going from left to right, diagonally upwards. So
Yeah.
that's you would see dots that are roughly scattered around that line. And then if we
Mm.
did the regression, the line is what determines that relationship, what that relationship is between
Right.
between the things. Now, once you know that relationship, you can predict that relationship. So this is how we
Mm.
use predictions. Because if I know one variable, then I can predict the other variable by knowing the relationship between the variables. So
Right.
if I have your height, I can now predict your weight, or
Mm.
vice versa. If I have your weight, I can now predict your height. What I've been working on recently, and this is the first time I'm mentioning it in public, is what I call probability cloud regression. So
Okay. You're
uh,
gonna have to talk me through that.
yeah. This is where it gets fascinating, and this is where
Okay.
this was actually inspired by quantum physics. Not in
Okay.
a good way. It's got absolutely nothing to do with quantum physics. It's not a
Okay.
quantum physics phenomena at all. But I was just thinking about it. I love cross-domain analogies, metaphors. That's kind of what I do.
Mm.
Um, in quantum physics, there's a phenomenon called wave-particle duality. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you heard of the double slit experiment, but basically, like they were able to. I mean, it's part. I'm not a quantum physicist. I'll probably screw this
Mm.
up, but let me explain it anyway. It's the idea that something can be a wave or exist as like a series of probabilities before it collapses into a particle. So
Right.
before it actually collapses into a measurement. So once we measure something, it's
Mm.
fixed. It's a particle. Prior to that measurement, it might have existed as a wave, as any position on a wave prior to that wave collapsing into a particle. I started thinking about data points as being probabilities instead of, because once you
Mm.
record the height and weight, it's fixed. It's observed. It's done. Yeah, but it's
Mm.
and height and weight are probably bad examples for what I'm talking about here. But like you could take any sort of, like, let's say temporal data analysis, I don't know, like age, or not even
Mm.
age is a variable, but something that could have been something else before it was measured. Yeah, like your mood.
Mm.
Um, your mood could fluctuate throughout the day. So, if I ask the question, before I recorded your mood, what are the possibilities that it could have been before we actually recorded it? And then I ask the question, okay, if I go back to that graph where I was talking about the line of best fit, and I'm looking at the dots on the graph, okay, what if instead of looking at just the dots and trying to find the line of best fit, I started thinking about what are the probabilities of what that dot could have been. So instead
Right.
of dots, what I now get is I get clouds, I get circles, I get ellipses, I get a little bit of,
Mm.
you know, in terms of regression, where it winds up being valuable is like measurement error. There's some level of measurement error. Like I'll bring it back to height and weight, in terms of saying, okay, height. You know, if I'm measuring your height with a ruler, um, and you know I've only got, you know, increments of 1 centimeter on the ruler, and your height happens to land between, say 1 and 2 centimeters or something like that. The point is I'm not capturing an entirely accurate measurement. So there's some level of noise in the measurement that I'm collecting. So that noise in the measurement, or that probability, gives us a range to work with. So instead of looking at dots on the graph, I'm now thinking about clouds. And when I look at how do I understand the relationships between these variables now, I'm starting to think about, like, what's the line of best fit if everything becomes a cloud instead of a dot point? Where do the clouds overlap? So if I'm looking at,
Right.
like, the corridor of best fit is different to, like, the line of best fit when I'm looking at the data points. And what I've actually managed to prove is, through running a whole bunch of experimental data sets, is that when I start thinking about statistics this way, the relation, I'm better able to predict the relationship between variables by looking at these things as clouds and understanding the measurement error involved, and a whole bunch of other stuff I want to bore you with. But basically, in a nutshell, I should be able to make better predictions. So, passion project of mine, planning on taking it places. First time you heard it here. I know it's boring statistical stuff. I know it's not the kind of thing that gets people excited. It just happens to be, one of those things that I managed to get obsessed over and talk to AI about, and actually wound up being useful. So I'm in the process of putting it together and trying to help people make better predictions and ultimately make better decisions, because if we can do that, then
Right.
we should be able to live in a better society. So,
Well, maybe you're able to kind of speculate for us then. If you were to take the system and implement it for human sustainability, how would
yep.
you go about that?
Okay. Yeah, totally. So, okay, what I do is I take a look at, so what this system wound up being really good at doing is understanding measurement error and understanding, there's a concept called amount of variance explained between variables. So once we draw that line of best fit, and we plot that relationship, we can take a look back at the data and say, like, it'll show up as a mathematical equation, basically, like y equals x intercept plus beta, whatever your number is, z, whatever the equation is. I'm not explaining it properly, but if I take that equation and I input the y number, I should get X as a result. If I go back to the data set and I don't get that result, then there's a portion of variance which isn't explained by the equation that I wrote. So what my system is doing is it's looking at that unexplained variance, and it analyzing where does that come from. So the things that we don't understand about, say, epidemiology relies on population level statistics about health and makes inferences like about that stuff. So one of the data sets I was running is the correlation, collects like body mass index and blood pressure.
Mm.
So as an example, so they'll look at the relationship between body mass index and blood pressure, and what they noticed was something called an obesity paradox, for example. So what
Okay.
happens? Um, Usually at the lower end, your blood pressure. If you've got a lower BMI, you've got a lower blood pressure, basically.
Hmm.
And the line of best fit goes up, but it goes up until a point beyond which, if you're obese, apparently your blood pressure goes down. So that
Right.
that was something that they didn't fully understand. They called it the obesity paradox. Now, the
Mm.
system that I designed managed to uncover the true relationship with it, and actually figure out what could be the confounding variable by analyzing the variance, and figuring out that this could actually be a medication effect, because
Right.
people that might be suffering from obesity might also be on blood pressure medication, which is bringing down their blood pressure. So
Right.
the system that I pieced together was able to figure that out just from looking at the data set. So information like
Mm.
that is helpful for public health policy. So
Yeah.
so being able to make better decisions about our understanding of health, our understanding of economics, our understanding of science, like this is useful for scientific data analysis as well.
Mm.
Is incredibly powerful. If I can take what we don't understand about a data set in terms of the relationships between variables, and I can improve the variance explained, then we can make better decisions based on an improved understanding of the data. So
Yeah, of course.
that
I can see
helps.
how that could have like wide societal uh,
Yeah, yeah.
implications.
That's why I'm so excited about it. That's why
Yeah.
this is like, when you think about how many fields rely on data, it's pretty much every field these days. Like
Yeah.
anywhere there's measurement, there's data. Anywhere there's
Mm.
observation, there's data. Yeah. So anywhere there's a discipline, there's a measurement, there's a data, and there's a relationship between the measurements that they're taking, that they're trying to infer a relationship from. Now, if I can
Mm.
better help people understand the relationship between the measurements, and more importantly, the measurement error, like the things that aren't being explained by the data that we have. If I can help
Mm.
people understand what's going on in that space, so and figure out like what are the confounding variables, for example, you know,
Mm.
it's in terms of the confounding variables between, say, you and I in this conversation. A confounding variable might be your understanding of statistical analysis, like
Yeah.
might limit your participation in the discussion. So these
Yes.
things like exist everywhere. So it's helping people to better understand what those variables are, is the type of contribution that I'm hoping to make. So
Yeah. Well, you know what? That was a positive note to kind of end on. That
yeah, sorry to shit on
you might
this week.
well, no, but like it could be useful for human sustainability.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I'm hoping it will be.
mm,
Yeah. It's a system with wide ranging possibilities, and I'm hoping to use it for good. So yeah.
yeah. And with that, let's move on to our final segment. What's that said by art? So, Kareem, what do you think the prompt for this one was?
Um, this I'm picturing a happy and healthy future, like a family that's hopeful about the future. Um,
Okay.
that's
So,
probably a
okay.
system.
So the prompt for, yeah, No worries. So the prompt for this one was human sustainability, making needs and wants subsist in a bright future. Oh, sorry, a brighter tomorrow.
Brighter tomorrow. Okay, all right. So I was right on the future part. I was a
Yes.
bit off on everything else, but
See the yeah, because you can see the couple with the
well,
girl, and then what
I'm
a wind
I'm a huge
turbine
fan.
there, and it's solar house, and
Oh, solar. Oh,
crops to the side.
I missed that
Yeah,
entirely. Yeah, synth wave solar house. Is that what it looks like?
and
I'm
it almost seems like they're suggesting that they are on another planet in our solar system. I'm going to assume maybe it's like Mars. Or actually, no, it's probably a
terra.
terraformed
Yes.
something near the moon because you can see the Earth just right there.
Ah, I missed that entirely as well.
Yeah,
Okay.
they've terraformed something because you can see Earth.
Yeah, yeah. That's man, you're way more observant than I am. Like I was too busy looking at this lightning tree over in the left hand corner and trying to figure out what that was.
Yeah, I'm not particularly sure what that's supposed to represent. Maybe that's uh, like supposed to be a neural network where everyone's
Yes.
connected in human sustainability.
Okay, I like that interpretation. So
Yeah.
it's my first thought was just it's a tree, sustainability. Like
Well, it could be a neural tree. So
yeah, futuristic tree. Yeah. Okay. All right.
yeah.
Yeah. Let's go with that. So
And with that, Kareem, thank you for coming on the podcast today. We
yeah,
really
always a
appreciate
pleasure,
it.
man. Always a pleasure. Yeah, glad we got to have a chat again. Yeah.
Yes, and if this is your first time here, please like, share, and subscribe. And remember to keep thinking and keep learning. And thank you for joining us today. And thank you for tuning in.
Thank you.